not take sides. That's not our job. Our job is to make sure there's a strong message that once we're an ally of the United States, we remain an ally in good times and bad. It's when the chips are down, you don't walk away and say, that guy is not nice, I don't like him, he's a cowboy and I don't want to work with him. That's not the way it works. You stick around and you stick with your friends even when they're not doing the things that you really like. That's the bottom line. So that was my philosophy. When I arrived, the chips of Hungary was down. And I had to reestablish this relationship. And Hungary, you know, put down its credentials fairly quickly. And I worked really very, very hard so that the United States, that Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, George W. Bush, and the Democrats understand that you can count on Hungary. Just think about this. We had a very strong stance on the Iraq War. We said, you know, this war is terrible, but if the United States goes to war, it's better to have the Allies go with it than not go with it. So we're stuck there. This is not a very popular view, right? And Americans hate you for it. So I said, I got to go and ask the other side, you know, what do we do? And I asked leading Democrats, what is it that Hungary should do in a situation like this? What is your expectation? And they said, we'll fight the Republicans. Your job is to stick with the United States when it is going to war. And that was the leading thread. And I know it is surprising to you, but the fact is, this is exactly what we did. We went into Iraq with the U.S. We established a training base for Free Iraqi Forces, which was a risky operation. You can get shot at for it. You can get Budapest blown up for that. But you take the risk because the message was, we want the American people to know that we're with it. That was really the foundation of my diplomatic efforts. And then, when that was clear, when my credentials as a diplomat were established, I could move on and to do a couple of things that were a little surprising, that were a little shocking, that was out of the box, but really got us so much attention that in the end, I just had to, you know, there was no one who said this was a stupid idea. Okay, first the rock band. I never intended to be an ambassador. I was going to be a rock and roll musician, just that you know. I started playing guitar when I was 14. I never wanted to become a diplomat. And you know, my training is not I don't have a diplomatic training. I'm an economist. And my love is really rock and roll music. It's, any of you play guitar? What kind of guitar do you have?
I have a Les Paul.
You have a Les Paul? Standard?
Standard.
That's a good one. That's a good choice. Sunburst, gold top?
Red, it was on sale.
You know what? Nothing wrong with that. Anyone else? What do you play?
Fender Strat.
That's good. Great. What color?
Black.
It's cool. Who else? What do you play?
I just got a cheap little cheesy acoustic cherry sunburst.
What?
Just a cheap little acoustic with a cherry sunburst.
Oh, well, I mean, if it's a good guitar, it doesn't matter if it's cheap. Yeah, good guitar. Okay. Well, I just want to say that this is really very much part of my upbringing, and when I started to. When I came to the United States, I arrived at the airport to the great astonishment of the bureaucrats from the State Department. I had a diplomatic case in one hand and I had a Telecaster in the other. And they kind of said, what the hell is this guy going to do? And so I nurtured this idea to put together a rock and roll band in Washington, D.C. A band that's like no rock and roll band ever. And I was very lucky because one of my best friends in the U.S. is Ambassador Sandy Birchbaugh, who is right at this moment, your Assistant Secretary of Defense, and at that time was your ambassador to Moscow. And I called Sandy and said, Sandy, I've got to play music and you've got to help me figure out how to do this. So he got me in touch with a couple of people. And, and then I called a guy by the name of Dan Poneman. And if you do your Googling, he will come up real fast because at this very moment, he is your Deputy Secretary of Energy. He's the number 2 at the Energy Department. And I called him and I said, this is the Hungarian ambassador, and I hear you have a rock band. I want to play with you. And he says, oh, sure, and I'm the ambassador to I don't know what. And he put down the phone. And I said, that was rude. And that was not nice. So I called him again and said, sir, I'm serious. Maybe you're surprised it's the Hungarian ambassador. He said, as a matter of fact, I am surprised. What do you want? So, long story short, he invited me, we were hanging out, and in the end, we figured out we'll put together a rock band. Good news was, who's heard of the Doobie Brothers, or Doobie Brothers? Ooh, that's good. And Steely Dan? Ooh, okay. Well, Skunk Baxter, Jeffrey Baxter, who is really one of your superstar guitar players, he happened to be in the same gang, and he said, you know what, we'll put this band together, and I want to be part of it. And once you have a superstar, very good professional musician with you, that's a guarantee this band is not going to fail. And finally, we only needed a bass player, and I had no idea who is going to be our bass player when I ran into Assistant Secretary of State Lincoln Bloomfield. And Assistant Secretary of Bloomfield and I, we were in business, we were doing business together. We were doing Iraq, we were doing Afghanistan, we were doing arms control, we were doing a lot of, an Assistant Secretary of State in the system is pretty high up, he talks to an ambassador if he wants to, okay? And I said, we're looking for a bass player. He said, what? How do you know I'm playing bass? Well, gossip, and he said no. And next day he said yes. And so we had this band together, and it was of course it was weird. What are we going to do, and how are we going to launch this? And it was so funny because in the end, of course, with a lot of practicing at night, you can't start rehearsing during the day and then have the staff go to the White House and the State Department. No, I'm sorry, I can't go with you because I'm rehearsing. You can't do that. But we were getting there, and we did a concert early in '04, and it was to my amazement, people like Brent Scowcroft, Frank Carlucci, and Paula Dobriansky she was cool. She was in a T-shirt, and all these people showed up and said, "Yeah, this is our music." And the funny thing was that in a weird way, this rock and roll band brought a lot of deadheads and rock and rollers out of the closet. They suddenly said, yeah, we like rock and roll music, but we didn't know we as bureaucrats and high officials were supposed to say this. Okay, got a lot of attention for me. And it also simply, and you have to understand this was not a trick. This was not just about the music. This was about my way of finding a new vehicle to talk to the American people. That's called soft power. I had something in my hand no other ambassador had. And I was able to communicate with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I was able to communicate with the President of the United States. He kind of said, well, if this guy is into rock and roll music, the way Americans understand rock and roll music, then it means that this is a helpful connect between Europe and America. So really, I just want to, of course I brag. Come on, what's wrong with Skunk Baxter standing next to me? And I remember, have you heard of the Blues Travelers? Who's heard of the Blues Travelers? Okay. Well, Popper is, by the way, half Hungarian, so he's a buddy. And I played with him, and I played